Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you very much for joining me here today. This is your one-stop shop for cryptocurrency analysis, among many other things. Now I'm excited to check this one out. This is Augur. My community had asked me to go ahead and cover this, and essentially we're going to take a look here today to see what's going on with the technicals. Now there's no fundamentals here, but I'm speculating that there is likely fundamental catalyst causing the price action to increase as it has recently. But it's got good history, it's got a good performance, so I do think that it's kind of in its infant stages of bouncing back, so to speak, at this point. So I'm really excited to kind of see what this is all about. Now, again, we're looking at Rep Augur, whatever you want to consider it as. The ticker symbol is REP. And just know I'm not a financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only. You should always do your own research. And just know I have years of trading experience, so I'm going to try to help educate you on how some best practice and how to be a better trader, teach you to trade for a lifetime, not just for one day. If you'd like information further on my community, feel free to reference my Telegram link in the description below. We got a good group of folks there. You can learn a lot just by kind of absorbing the information, engaging, and obviously finding best practice through that as well. Furthermore, I do have a signal group if you'd like to check that out through my Patreon account, where I send out 3 to 5 signals per week, utilizing the methods we're going to talk about here today when I find my signals that I share with my community. So check that out in your own time. But either way, really appreciate you joining me here today. Let's go ahead and jump right into the charts. Let's check it out. All right, folks, let's go ahead and take a look at Rep, which is Augur. And before we do, we're always taking a look at Bitcoin and Ethereum first, just so we get a baseline in the market. So if you are new to the channel, we always look at both to ensure we have kind of a bigger understanding of what's going on. Because if Bitcoin is doing poorly and this coin is doing awesome, we need to know what the difference is and the correlation as well. So we're going to take a look at both. Or all three, of course. And what we do first is we look at Bitcoin first, but this is TradingView.com. So just note, I use TradingView desktop application. This is probably the best charting tool you could utilize. I have a discount in the description below if you'd like to consider, paying for that monthly. They do offer, free, of course, as well, but I would recommend the paid version just because you can put more indicators up there and you don't have to keep adding and removing them. There's a lot of other functions that come with that. So consider that in your own time. But for now, we're looking at the 4-hour chart for Bitcoin. What we do first is we enable our simple moving averages, because I believe the simple moving averages work better on the larger time frames. So 4-hour, 1-day charts, simple moving averages all day. 15-minute charts or lower, exponential moving averages. It just makes more sense because the price, the EMA works stronger with the price action, so why not have it on a shorter time frame? So that being said, we have the simple moving averages here. The 200 is the purple, orange is the 50, and the 50-day moving average recently has been a constant support and resistance level. It's typically getting tested multiple times before breaking through or rejecting. So just bear that in mind. Price comes up here to the 50 and tests it again. You probably shouldn't expect it to come blasting right through immediately. If you look back here at the history, it was tested 4 times, rejected there, tested 5 times, broke through, came up, rejected, tested about 5 more times, broke through, came up, rejected on the 200, and you kind of see this rinse and repeat action, right? It keeps testing, anywhere between 4 to 6 4-hour time frames, right? So that's somewhere like 16 to 24 hours consistently before it breaks through. So we can see it come up here and test 50. There's a good chance it'll bounce off, hold against the moving average, and either break through or reject. But just note right now, we are making lower lows and lower highs right now, okay? So we got lower high, lower high, lower high, potential lower high here, and also, again, lower lows. So those are things to note. That just kind of helps us understand that it's kind of more of a bearish sentiment right now. And until that changes and we get some higher highs and higher lows, we might see that continue. So it can even come down as low as 30,000, somewhere in that range. Speaking of which, we have a major support at 30,000, major resistance at 36,500 and 42,000. So just bear in mind, there's a channel between 36.5 and 42 that hasn't been tested in a while. So our first major milestone, minus the 2 moving averages, is to break above the 36,500 mark. All right, next up is Ethereum. Let's take a look here. First to note, we got 2,900 as a major resistance, and major support is 1725. So that's approximately what we're looking at right in between on that channel there. And then if we look down here, of course, the moving averages, we've got both moving averages working above the price. But at this point in time, Ethereum is essentially just the ugly stepchild for Bitcoin because it doesn't know what it wants to do. It's doing poorly compared to what we're used to, because in the past, Ethereum's done very well, right? Take a look at this here. This ramp up here is when Bitcoin first went sideways. Now, it doesn't know what the heck it wants to do. So it's just unfortunate. It's no longer the coin that people migrate over to when Bitcoin does poorly. So the market capitalization is dwindling, so to speak, but there's just a low volume, a low volatility with Ethereum. Altogether, would recommend avoiding it for the moment until we see something happen with Bitcoin where it comes upwards of 36,500 and tests that resistance level and breaks above. That'd be nice, right? So that'll be kind of the hope for Ethereum. Now moving on to Rep or Augur, whichever you'd like to call it. We're going to look at the one-day chart first, get a quick history, and move on. So as we can see here, Rep did pretty standard last year. In fact, it's been around for a while, as you can see. And obviously it did ramp up as well as Bitcoin. At its highest point, we were upwards of, it's April 10th, at $60. That's right when Bitcoin was testing the 64,000 mark. So it makes sense that it was kind of ramping up at that point. But as we can kind of see here, let's take a closer look at some certain time frames, some big time frames for Bitcoin. First thing was April 17th. So April 17th here is the first major sell-off from Bitcoin, and the 22nd is the second major sell-off. So both times we see the price come down, price came down. We've got the 25th, that makes sense. Most everything came up on the 25th because that was the first recovery from Bitcoin. And then of course, May 12th, this guy here, thanks Elon, that's the Elon candle there. And then of course we got the most major one here, which is the China candle, all right? So generally speaking, we're looking at some pretty standard movement here from Augur or Rep. It really it's moving the way that it should with the market, right? So it's not doing anything contradictory to Bitcoin in that sense. It's really just kind of moving alongside it. And as we can see, it's kind of worked itself into this channel down here. But before we transition over, I do want to note two things. First of all, the average true range before all these crazy sell-offs occurred up here is somewhere in the range of 24 upwards of $51. Right? Probably more so an average of 36. So we kind of split the difference and just take the average price of where it was at before Bitcoin sold off, $36. Now that's important because we need to know that, in its projection, in its, where it's going to be here in the future, it should be able to reach $36 again if Bitcoin can get upwards of 36,500 and test 42,000, okay? Again, that's the reason why I say this, because it works well with Bitcoin, so it's moving the same as Bitcoin is in a sense. In other words, Bitcoin kind of calls the shots. But today there was likely some kind of fundamental catalyst that pushed it up, and or the RSI was too low, there we go, for too long, and it had to recover at one point. So we see the RSI under 30 there, followed by a convergence on the MACD. Right there would have been a perfect entry point. Again, I know it's easier said than done now, but right here is when you should have got in according to the MACD, because when you see an RSI on the one-day chart under 30, that's like an instant indication of a buy signal. Concurrently, if we see not 2 or 3 days later the MACD converging in an upward fashion where the 12 swings upwards to 26, then we see some magic happen. And that's right where I'm venturing to guess the Ichimoku cloud would have told us that there's a buy signal as well. Okay, so again, just something to note. That's, again, hindsight's 20/20, but you see this happen more often than not. RSI on the one-day chart gets under 30. Pay close attention, consider taking entry, because there's a strong chance, unless we have a significant sell-off from Bitcoin again, that we're going to see that probably be the lowest point for Rep at this time. Okay, that was somewhere in the range of $10 to $12. Let's go ahead and move on to the 4-hour chart. Oh, one thing I forgot to note as well, there was a death cross here. And I use quotations because honestly, it's not always 100%, but coincidentally, that was the same exact time when Bitcoin sold off. So that's why you see that here. But on the 21st of June, there was a death cross and the price came down. Okay. And death cross, by the way, is just when the 50 intersects with the 200 in a downward fashion. We could, in the future here, see a golden cross where the price comes back up when the 200 is kind of going sideways, right? That's kind of what we're looking for. Essentially, that would be a buy signal. Okay. Again, that's on the 1 hour or the one-day chart. Primarily, that's the one that is the one of the bigger catalysts. Second biggest catalyst is the 4-hour chart. And what I mean by that here is take a look at this. And this is kind of essentially a golden cross in a sense, because you can see the price is swinging upwards through the 200 to essentially create that effect, right? Now, is that the reason why the price jumped up today? It's hard to say. It could be, but it likely crossed because the price went up too. So keep that in mind. I try not to put a lot of value or weight into the golden cross or death cross. I think they're kind of ominous and unnecessary, but it does play a part, right? What we want to look at here is the RSI. RSI is up over 70, but trailing back down, bounced off of 70 and still above. That's neither here nor there. That doesn't really matter all that much. The MACD did indicate, obviously, we have a convergence, big surprise. The price just swung up there. So not much to really note on the 4-hour chart, except that we had that golden cross. Yeah. What I'm excited to look at here is the 1-hour chart. So the Ichimoku cloud, let's go ahead and take a look at that next on the 1-hour chart. And first of all, if you're new to the channel, I put a lot of weight into the Ichimoku cloud because it's pretty consistent. In other words, it'll probably be breaking above the cloud at this point, which is right where it's signaled on the MACD. Let's take a look here. All right, pretty close. It's a few hours off, but generally speaking, the concept still stays the same. In other words, with the Ichimoku cloud, when the price breaks above the cloud, it's considered a buy signal. When it breaks below, considered a sell signal. It's not always 100%. Don't get me wrong. This could have been a good sell signal, but the price continued upwards. Now, obviously, there was a good bull run and a period of consolidation. It continued. That's neither here nor there. But the bottom line is, if you were to look back here, history has a tendency of repeating itself, right? But again, it doesn't have to. But in this case, we saw tons of good shorting opportunities. Okay. So again, general rule of thumb, the price is over the cloud, buy signal, under the cloud, sell signal, within the cloud, don't touch. All right. So that being said, we're well above the cloud right now, so obviously it's a buy signal, but keep in mind, the price could be trending down into the cloud again, and if it does, then that would be a consideration to wait until it breaks above again. Okay. So that's kind of how the cloud works. Let's take a quick look at TD Sequential. We'll just go ahead and see if there is any indication of exhaustion at this point. And so what you want to look for is 9, right? And this kind of tells us, actually, that's a good sign. This means there's a strong chance we might see the price continue upwards from here, in the sense that we have the 9 indication here. So if you're unfamiliar with the TD Sequential, it's time to mark sequential. It gives you a sequence of numbers, whereas the fourth bar needs to be higher than the previous fourth bar. In other words, this one has to be lower than this one, and so on and so forth. But what it basically does is it tells us if there's a 9, it means it's reached a state of exhaustion. There's likely to be a turnaround. So coincidentally, we just had a 9 trigger here. So that tells us that we shouldn't see any more bearish sell-off or sentiment. We should continue to see at least 7 to 8 more hours worth of bullish momentum. It may not be significant, it might just be a period of consolidation, but we should likely see the price increase from here. Okay. So that's a good buy signal. So we're getting some pretty decent signals here. All in all, it does appear to be good value at this point. So let's go ahead and turn that off. And just to clarify, I forgot to mention TD Sequential and Ichimoku Cloud are the best in the 1-hour chart. Always utilize those on that time frame, because other time frames are not, they kind of give some false signals sometimes, and I don't think it's as effective. TD Sequential can be utilized in the 4-hour and the 1-day chart. It's just, in my opinion, not as impactful. So if you follow along and do what I do right now on every chart analysis, you'll be much better off to make a more informed decision. So looking at the 15-minute chart here. So I utilize my EMA View app notification. This is something I share with my patrons. So feel free to reference my Patreon account if you'd like to consider that. But this is essentially just an indication of telling us what's going on. So you can enable this yourself. You don't need my notification. This just kind of gives you a heads up on when to buy and when to sell. However, when you look at this here, we are looking at the EMA and VWAP. The VWAP is the blue line. That's the volume weighted average price. Takes the volume last 24 hours, expresses it as a price. The red line is the exponential moving average. That's the 15. I use the 15 over the 9 and the 20 because I prefer one indicator and not two. I want less noise in my charts, so I just prefer that myself. So the EMA is a good moving average, basically telling us that when the price is above, it's considered a buy signal, or more so just bullish sentiment, and when it's below, it's considered bearish. And as you can see here, look at the price comes up, retraces back down, but nevertheless, it stayed above the EMA line. Therefore, bulls are still in control. So you could have confidently moved on with your position or added to your position there at that point. That wouldn't be a bad entry point, honestly. Okay, so that's kind of where you're at. And then obviously, you want to concurrently look at the RSI as well. Once it peaks up over 70, which it did right here, you might want to consider selling or trimming. Again, you want to wait for the RSI to come back down in most cases, but that's, again, just an indication of a potential sell signal, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at there. So ultimately, when you're looking at these types of runs, right? When we have a sharp increase like we have right now, when we got this, instant jump up and then some sideways action, there's a strong chance based on what we've seen so far that it'll continue upwards. It probably will, but it has to consolidate and have a period of some breathing room in order for it to recover and calm down. So if we look at the variance between the VWAP and the price action here, that was over 12% at that point. Anytime you have anything over 10%, in other words, a standard deviation from the VWAP line to the highest point in the price action, it almost always retraces over 10%. So as soon as the price came up over 10% there, it had to come back down. Cool thing is it didn't retrace 50% of its original movement. It's only retracing about 20 to 30%. So that tells us there's still room, gas left in the tank, and there's a strong chance that the price will continue upwards. Okay. So that is kind of how you utilize that. Furthermore, if you're going to consider taking entry here, a good indication of a buy signal is to wait for full confirmation. To me, confirmation is 30 minutes above EMA and VWAP. So my notification setup here, it basically tells you. So in other words, this yellow caret tells us that these two lines closed above EMA and VWAP, and that would be a strong indication of a buy signal. So hypothetically, if I were trading Augur right now, I would consider taking entry at this point right around 1920. So hopefully you find benefit here. If you do, like and subscribe. If you don't, that's okay. Perhaps another time. But I hope you did find some type of understanding of how to properly look at charts, because these are things that I've done for years, and honestly, I just really truly enjoy doing this. So feel free to register for my Patreon account if you'd like to have just say 3 to 5 signals per week, where I utilize this method myself in finding good entry points for my trades, and I share that with my community. I also have a Telegram community too. That's no cost for that, of course, and that's just a good place to learn, absorb, and understand as much as you possibly can. Okay, because we're all in this together. It's us versus them, if you want to call it that, right? The people versus the whales, and we'll go ahead and figure it out. But I do appreciate you once again joining me here today, and I hope you have a great rest of your time. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care. Thank you.